since it is 2:07. Let me just introduce myself to Douglas, and that must be Paige, right? Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this next installment in the webinar series for the Wyoming Family Engagement Project. And today we're going to be focusing on collaborating with community. So as a reminder, my name is Lacey Wood. I'm the consultant working with the Wyoming State Department of Education on the Family Engagement Project. I work with the American Institutes for Research. I've been doing family engagement work since 2000, working at both policy, research, and practitioner implementation levels. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation if anyone wants to contact me with questions later on. And then just as a reminder, for the webinar, all the participants have been muted. If you do have a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself and speak up, or you can type a question in the chat box, and folks will let me know that I've got questions coming in. I can't see the chat box myself, but so just holler if we've got some of those to look at. So today, for our webinar, we've got two objectives. We're really going to talk about characteristics of meaningful collaboration, and specifically collaboration with other organizations and entities in your community, and then really explore some strategies for building those collaborations with community organizations. How do you do it? What does it look like? What's important to focus on? What are some of the results that you can see? These are a few of the things that we're going to talk about today. And then as a reminder, this work fits into the larger frame of the Wyoming Project WIN, or the Wyoming Instructional Network, and then the Wyoming Family Engagement Project. And you've got those URLs there on the screen. If you go to the Wyoming Family Engagement Project page, you can see the series of webinars and dates and access those recordings for those that have already been finished. And this is a reminder that we've really organized this webinar series around the PTA's National Standards for Family School Partnerships. There are a few different standards out there in the field of family engagement. They are all very similar. When we look at the research, we find always the same things are important when trying to engage families and the community with schools to support education, student achievement, and school success. So although Wyoming has chosen to focus on the national PTA standards, there are other standards out there, but they all are really focused on the same outcomes and goals, building those welcoming, respectful, trusting partnerships with family and community that are linked to learning and that support advocacy for individual children and children across the school. And this is a reminder of the different standards that are coming out of that PTA National Standards for Family School Partnerships, and we are focusing on number 6 today, collaborating with community. And here again is a graphic representing how those all fit together. So let's now focus on our topic for the day. And when we're thinking about collaborating with community, we're really thinking about how families and staff in the school are able to collaborate with community members, community-based organizations in a way that connects students, families, school staff to different opportunities those community organizations can provide. And those might be expanded learning opportunities, opportunities for community services, opportunities for civic participation, just as a few examples of what that can be. So how can we develop collaborations that really are focused on supporting learning and strengthening partnerships across all stakeholders? And that's what we want to talk about today. It's great to have partnerships that provide additional resources to the school or district, but we know you're going to see the best results when those partnerships focus on student learning and And then we really want to focus those partnerships on ways that they're strengthening outcomes for all the stakeholders. It's strengthening outcomes for the school. It's strengthening outcomes for the community-based organization, and it's strengthening outcomes for the family and the student. So why do we want to do this? Why do we want to collaborate? Because it's not easy. Building these partnerships is never easy. It takes a lot of extra work. But we know that community partners can help with a number of things. They can help support school safety. They can help strengthen your school climate. They can help strengthen your impact on academic, social, emotional, and the physical needs of students. They can also help school districts and schools address an increasingly diverse community, an increasingly diverse student population that you may not have a lot of experience supporting in the past. And really importantly, they're able to offer opportunities for learning outside the school that a school or district would normally not have the resources to do. So what are some of the things that they can provide? I mean, there's so many things, but kind of off the top of our heads, why bring these community partners in, and why create these strategic partnerships? They can provide transportation for families to get to the school, transportation for field trips and different events for both students and families and staff. They're able to provide child care during these events. They're often able to provide food and beverages, and I know this is one of the most important things. It sounds like a simple thing, but finding the resources to provide food and beverages for events can be hard, and we know you're not going to get the families to the school building unless you have these food and beverages and refreshments, especially when they're coming after hours, during lunch. We know how important it is to feed people at these events. Community partners are able to provide volunteer support. They're able to provide opportunities for service learning for your students. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. They're able to provide additional facilities for your events and for your performances. They're able to provide career and workforce training, and then also a number of different academic enrichment opportunities. And this is just a few things, so there's so much more that community partners can offer your school or your district. And what do we see? What do we see when schools and districts really collaborate with community-based organizations? What are some of the potential outcomes that we see? Well, when we look at the research, we see increased academic achievement. We see more access for students to challenging academics. We see safer schools. We see increased social and emotional development for youth, a more positive school climate, and then some of the things that, you really are seeing coming out of that relationship with the community-based organization. You're seeing the community see more and more the youth as a valuable asset to that community that they want to help grow and develop. You see them having higher expectations for youth, and you see them having more trust in schools and in the district. Okay, so what is our goal here? So we know when we look at the PTA national standards, each standard has 1 or 2 goals. I think some even have 3, but the goal for this collaborating with community is really just connecting the school with those community resources. Sounds pretty basic, but we know that actually finding the right partnerships, cultivating those partnerships, focusing them on shared, meaningful involvement is not easy, so we want to be very deliberate and strategic about how we do this work. So, in your district, do parents and school leaders work closely with community organizations, with businesses, with maybe institutes of higher education, and really efforts to strengthen the school, bring more resources to the district, bring more resources to your school staff and family, and ultimately build a more family-friendly community. So just think about that while I'm going through the presentation and talking about the slides. Are these things happening in your school or district community? Are you developing these types of partnerships? So when connecting the school with community resources, we want to think about some specific actions for schools and districts. One, and we've talked about this before, is really being able to collect, but not only collect, but describe and distribute and inform families about the community resources that are out there for them. And it really also helps you. Building these partnerships really can help the district and the school understand family needs, understand the services that these community-based organizations provide, and then have the school or district staff really be there to make referrals to these programs for families and students. So once you know what that child needs and once you know what that family needs, and then you also have a strong understanding of the resources and services available in the community, the district and school can provide an excellent service in making those referrals. So going beyond just distributing that information and making sure that families have it in their hands. So when you're looking at this, we also want to make sure you organize support from community partners. And so how do you want to do that? Some ways to do that is to invite these community-based organizations to present information on their services at your family events. You want to engage these partners in sponsoring programs. So like I said before, your family engagement events, you're going to need food, childcare, perhaps transportation, maybe a different facility. These community-based organizations and partnerships can really be key in providing this information, resources, and sponsoring these events. I really want to push you also to create partnerships where you've got community partners sponsoring scholarships. And they can be small scholarships of like $500 or less, but something that really provides an incentive for the student to attend school more regularly, to put themselves out there and do community-based projects. These are some things that you can really partner with businesses around to provide incentives or scholarships for your students to do this work. And then you want to partner to assess community needs and find ways that they can provide resources. So it's not just about the needs of the school, the needs of the student, or the needs of the family, but what are the needs of these organizations? And what are the needs in your community that the school can help meet? Because ultimately, we want to create a partnership where all stakeholders are meeting each other's needs. And so within this partnership you develop with these community-based organizations, that's going to be most successful and sustained if you're also meeting a need of that business. Another approach is to really focus on making the school a hub for the community. And when you're doing that, we want to think about really providing the school and district facilities for community events, providing parent education classes in partnership with these community organizations. You can provide your recreational facilities after hours, whether that be the playground or the track or the gym, but facilities for the community to really come in and use those facilities after hours so they begin to really see the school building as part of one of their community resources. And similarly, providing access to the library, the computer lab, and other resources like that. And then partnering with these community groups to support student success. As a reminder, just bring it all back home. Why are we doing this? We're doing this to create better outcomes for our students, to improve our schools. And so we want to make sure that the partnerships are focused on those outcomes. And some of the things you can do is partner to provide resource fairs. Identify community businesses that can provide resources for specific student projects and learning. So businesses that really can connect with things students are learning in the classroom. If students are learning economics or financials, then partnering with a bank to help provide that information or to provide community service projects the students can do with that bank. Again, providing those recreational facilities. But I think what's really important here is working with these community organizations and groups to truly co-develop solutions and supports for your family's needs. So we all know that this partnership is going to work a lot better if you guys are identifying needs together and co-developing those solutions to those needs so that you're all equal partners in that work. So let's just talk for a few minutes about what we mean by collaboration. I think it sounds very simple, and we all collaborate a lot in our lives, in our personal lives, in our work lives. But when we're creating these partnerships, it's really important to kind of have your eye on the prize. Really, what does it mean to have a strong collaboration? And that's something that's going to be mutually beneficial. That collaboration needs to be well-defined. It's a relationship that's entered into by two or more groups that are working together to achieve results. So that's key, mutually beneficial, more than one group that are working together. So when we talk about collaborative relationships, we talk about the capacities of partners being expanded and enhanced. We talk about a culture where you're really viewing each other as partners rather than competitors. Everyone has something to bring to the table. Everyone has a contribution, and you're really sharing responsibility for that work. Not only are you sharing responsibility, but you're also sharing the risks, the reward, and the credit. So, kind of to unpack this even further, a lot of times when we talk about collaboration, we are talking about a continuum to get there. And the continuum being cooperating, kind of the first, and then you're coordinating, and then you're really collaborating. So when you're cooperating, this is generally, you're using resources to support other agencies. It happens on an as-needed basis. It often happens informally. There's no joint planning, and information is just conveyed as needed. Cooperation as needed. The next on that line in the continuum is coordination or coordinating. And this is really organizing or combining resources to more effectively reach a mutual goal. But it's really an interaction around one specific project or task. Organizations kind of fill the role as needed, but they're functioning separately. So you're coordinating what you're doing, but you're functioning as separate entities. And there may be some planning required, but authority is really resting within each organization, and there's not a lot of sharing of leadership. The ultimate goal, as we've been saying, is getting to collaboration or collaborating, where we're really collectively applying resources towards problems, and we're sharing ownership for that work. And that's often characterized by a common goal. You have a new mission that you've entered into together. You're creating goals together. You are undertaking one or more projects to create solutions or get to results. You're creating a new structure to foster this partnership. And you're doing a lot of comprehensive planning and communicating on many different levels and pooling resources. This is just an example of different ways that organizations work with each other and what you're really aiming for when we're talking about collaborating with community. So we know when you're collaborating with community, you could say there are challenges for rural settings or small towns. And that can be distance from other businesses, a small population. There are fewer service agencies and organizations. Maybe there's less racial or ethnic diversity in some areas. But often a lot of what you're dealing with is long-standing kind of town lines or class divisions or a culture that's existing in your community that is just not conducive to collaboration. I would say even though we can name all these things as challenges, I would not put too much into this, because when I've been out doing this work, some of the strongest, most innovative collaborations I've seen are in rural communities. Maybe it takes a little bit more work at the beginning, but what we find is within these small towns, rural communities, non-urban settings, that these partnerships that are developed often stick, and they last, and they're sustained, and they often really bring a lot of resources into these partnerships. And so you want to find ways to overcome some of these challenges. I think because you may have closer relationship with leaders in the community, they're there, you can create networks with them, you can find these partnerships, you can create a very trusting and open relationship with these groups. But this is just a reminder that there are these challenges, but they can easily be overcome as much as within any other community that you see. And that once you have developed these partnerships, you can be really in a place for a long-standing, successful, and sustained partnership that becomes very valued not only by the school and district community, but by the community as a whole. Okay, we're going to keep moving here and start talking about some strategies to support these collaborations. So in thinking about this, how can we make sure we develop cooperative, coordinated, and most importantly, meaningful collaborative partnerships? Because we can create these partnerships and have a great friend at the senior home down the road, the library, the bank, the police station, but it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be meaningful for your school and your district, but also for those business leaders. So, where do we really want to start when we want to focus on developing these meaningful partnerships? I think one is really work to find partners that have compatible goals. Who in your community is very invested in creating successful youth that are both successful in academics, social, and emotional skills coming out of your schools and districts? Who are going to be the businesses that are most want to leverage that and most interested in that happening? Or perhaps you have a goal around school and community safety that you want to address, and then you would go out and find partners who very much have that compatible goal or need within the community. Maybe it's about literacy, that your goal is around strengthening literacy not only for your students but your families. Well, there are a number of businesses out there that would also have that same goal for the community. So this is really just about being strategic, really searching to find partners that have goals that are compatible with what you're trying to achieve, then going on to focus on developing those relationships as mutually beneficial around those goals, and then creating a collaborative leadership system within that partnership. So, more about where do you start? Sometimes it's hard. I know, too, when we've been living in these communities for many years, it's hard to see that opportunity that might just be 2 blocks over as a fresh opportunity for a partnership. But I would challenge you all to see every opportunity as a resource for the school or community collaboration. Work really with those businesses and community-based organizations to find out what are their concerns. What are the concerns they have about education and youth in the community? And this is about, kind of creating that mutual goal. And then use those conversations and data you pull from those conversations or even from surveys to find a mission match. So when you're going into this, you want to make sure that you guys have the same mission and that for that partnership, you are creating a shared vision and goals. Again, a focus on meeting the needs of the community. So the more that you can, link the success of your students and the success of your school to community development, and why having successful students who are skilled in different areas. Maybe it's the STEM fields, maybe it's the arts, maybe it's history or civic education. Why that's important to development in your community and growth within your community. Again, identify and understand the priorities of all your stakeholders, and how those will fit into your broader goals. And then use that information to really be strategic about developing these partnerships. So your partnership with the police station could look very different than a partnership with an advocacy organization, or a partnership with the library, or a partnership with the hospital. But really making sure that as you're developing these partnerships, and they might have all be around the same goal of strengthening student achievement in a certain area, each of those partnerships with those different businesses is going to look different and probably be structured differently for success. And again, I said, like I mentioned, getting the right information and using that information to drive these partnerships is really key. So surveys and discussion groups, and not only to identify needs, but to really broaden perspectives about the roles the partners can provide in this partnership, and what they can provide and what they can bring to the table. So really just focusing in on getting a deep understanding of where everybody is at the table, what they can provide, and how they can help the work move forward. And to do this work, you really need to have the right leaders. So you want to find leaders that have a good understanding of the different cultures in the community, and a recognition of the different cultures, the different interests and values of the organizations at the table. You need someone that has a strong understanding of how these agencies operate, because they're all going to have different logistical needs in the way they operate and interact with your school and district. And then, the strong leader is going to be able to take this information and develop a long-term plan. A long-term plan for community action, but also a long-term plan for sustaining this partnership. So another way to start really is with community asset mapping. And this is really where you're working hard with your colleagues to find existing relationships and partnerships that can be expanded, or connections to individuals in the community where you can develop new partnerships. So this can often be a visual representation of your community, and it can include the various skills people have and what they have to offer to these partnerships. And you can set this up so it also is listing, materials they can bring in at a cost or for free, how they can invest in different projects. But this is really a way to just start getting it all out there. So you can put it up on a big whiteboard or poster paper or anything, but what are your connections to all these different agencies, organizations, and important stakeholders and leaders in your community? And one way to do that is start by reviewing resource guides, such as your social service directories, scanning community, civic, and government websites, business websites. Another way that is really good for getting at specific leaders within these communities is reviewing lists of their board members from these different nonprofit organizations. So they all have to publicly, list this information so that you can get on and find these list of board members, and then find who you might know within the community that knows that board president or knows that person on that board that can really help grease the wheels to creating a strong partnership. And in thinking about where these resources come from, or where these leaders come from, they can be from all sectors, from child welfare, they can be from criminal justice, from universities and other institutions of higher education, public transportation, healthcare, local business, and then, we don't want to forget about the public sector. Many of these public sector organizations have an education liaison that you can work with. And then it's important as you're developing these partnerships to not have a top-down leadership style just coming from the school or district. You really want to focus on collaborative leadership, in which you want to be able to distribute power, authority, and responsibility across all stakeholders, and to be able to develop firm partnerships where everyone feels like they have a leadership position and a responsibility and a strong role. So when we think about collaborative leaders and the types of leaders we want for this work, these are some of the characteristics. They are really fostering these shared commitments. They are focused on a lasting relationship and partnership. They're very respectful of everyone's ideas and efforts. They are able to provide appropriate levels of autonomy for people. They're not micromanaging. People are really there to lead in their own role. They're great at sharing information and knowledge, encouraging suggestions. And I think what's really important with these partnerships is just acknowledging that these roles and responsibilities often have to evolve and fluctuate. These partnerships don't get developed and then just stay static. They're often changing. And then one of the things that we can really do with these community-based partnerships and organizations is create opportunities for service learning. Really opportunities for students to get out there and do things with these organizations and get out in the community and apply the things they're learning in the classroom. Often that can be hard, so here's just some areas to start with. You can start with the curriculum. You can start thinking about a theme or a topic. You can start with a need identified by students or a need identified by the community. So really, when you're thinking about service learning opportunities, there's so many different things. They can be around, around nutrition, food service, nutrition education, working with food shelters. It can be within your education community, providing tutoring to students in other grade levels, being mentors. It can be work with health or mental health services. It can be environmental projects and studies. It can be, helping with special project work. They can be service projects with veterinarians where they're observing work with vets and then doing research projects on different animal conditions. Stuff like I mentioned on environmental education. There's so many different things and opportunities that can be opened up for student projects once you start building these partnerships. So when we're talking about this, just a few things that you really want to make sure that you do when you're building these things. You really need to plan to integrate these partnerships across what you're doing. So if it's going to be a standalone activity, it's not going to be as beneficial to your school or district. It really should be integrated across your school improvement plan or your family engagement plan and be something that is building out each year. I know that we talk about these partnerships being mutually beneficial and everyone being on their, sharing responsibility, and that sounds terrific, but for these to work, in reality, you need to really create firm mutual agreements and get that on paper so everyone understands what their role is and what's expected of them. And those can be memorandums of understanding. You can co-develop with these partners, but this is just a reminder to create a firm mutual agreement. I think it's really important when you're doing this to continue to share your successes and challenges. It really motivates people to keep doing the work. You really want to make sure that as you're building these partnerships, they're structured and monitored through planning and evaluation activities. So just any of the work like you do in your school or district every day, but that it would be the same, monitored through planning and evaluation. And lastly, like I've mentioned, you need to keep focusing on sustainability. Okay, so that's just some of the background around the research. Why do we want to do this? What are the outcomes that we see? What are some of the characteristics of the work? What does it look like? And what are some of the strategies for getting started that we just went over? But I do want to just talk a little bit about what it can look like and what are some ideas for implementation. So, this work can really evolve and look differently. And like I mentioned, you need your common vision. You need clearly defined roles. You need this work to be integrated in your overall school improvement plan. And you need the community partners to be able to adapt and work with the school. So to do that, you need to encourage open dialogue all the time. One strategy that I think is important, and I know this is hard, but to create a district position or someone in the district with responsibility for this community partnership work. And I think that's important because, just having that one person who's dedicated to making sure that these partnerships are healthy, they're maintained and sustained, just having someone who has that in their job description is very important to the success of this work. When you're looking at these partnerships, you want to really leverage different community resources and be able to braid funding streams. So, whereas the district or the school can often provide space, they can provide maintenance, other community partners can come in and provide services. They can provide different staff and volunteers, and they can provide training and capacity building through their funding. So think about, the resources that each partner brings and how they can be braided together. We know for this to work, you really need to have that ongoing professional development for all partners. So regular meetings with all stakeholders to ensure you continue to build this relationship and trust, and a common vocabulary around the work that you're doing. And as you're developing these partnerships too, make sure that you, one, create that detailed plan for long-term sustainability and a communication plan that you're using to share your progress and highlight what's working. And that's really why it's important to have this district office position who is in charge of fostering these partnerships and relationships. So what can some of these projects look like? What are some ideas that we see out there? And we see partnerships that are very focused around public relations campaigns that the school and district wants to push out. So it might be something around a topic such as attendance, or the importance of graduating from high school, or the importance of going on to career or secondary education. And so partnering with the media, with a local radio station or television stations, or even faith-based organizations to get this word out there. Partnering with supermarkets and restaurants to be able to post this information or hold events there. So, really using this to support a district public relations campaign. Another idea is really just bringing those community members or people that are working in those community businesses into the school to participate in events or be volunteers. I mean, they can do things as simple as be in your morning carpool lane or your afternoon pickup. They can join the school volunteer program and help train volunteers in different areas. They can do things like come to class and read to the students once a month or present on the work that their company does. Or they can even conduct workshops for students and families. Another thing that we find is, when you're working with them, just making sure that they are seen as a strong partner with the school and that you're sharing resources. So like I said, making your school a hub for the community, not just community members, but for these community businesses, letting them use your auditorium, your cafeteria, the rec center, providing exercise classes or nutrition guidance in the school gym in partnership with these groups. Also making sure you bring everybody together quarterly or more often to have community forums, to have these businesses help open dialogue with the community about what's needed and how you as a school partnering with these organizations can help. And then when we get down to more specific things, you could work with the Parks and Recreation Department to work with a local park to offer a summer family sports program. So partnering with Parks and Recs to offer a summer family program focused on sports. We see partnerships where schools and districts are partnering with the local police department, and the police department is providing training to teachers and families and students on conflict resolution. We see partnerships where they're cooperating with local hospitals or local healthcare clinics to develop a school-based health clinic. And that could be something that's just in the school, once a month or quarterly or even more often, but bringing those healthcare providers to the school. Cooperating and building partnerships with local businesses, like I said previously, to develop, small scholarships. So, we see businesses supporting scholarships like for outstanding attendance, where students would get $500 to use towards higher education, or giving special awards to students who had the most impressive community involvement record. We see partnerships that are very structured and matching students with local businesses for summer internships. So really matching the skills and the interests of the student with what that internship can provide. We see a lot of partnerships that are working with the neighborhoods to address community safety. So schools and these neighborhoods doing crosswalks across the area, walking together to support neighborhood safety, doing neighborhood block watches, neighborhood block parties, really to guard against crime and different community issues. And, different things like that. So when we think about these community resources, so say it's a church or a religious institution, they can provide a lot of benefits. They can provide space for an after-school center or a literacy program, and they can provide materials. They can provide, clothes from their resale shop. When you're looking at partnerships with colleges or universities, they can provide tutors and mentors for summer programs, after-school programs. They can help work with future teachers, and they can provide space, and they can provide employment for students. When you're working with businesses, again, looking for donations, scholarships, mentors, and these service learning opportunities like I mentioned. And then really working with those businesses to find out, what do you want from your future employees that are coming out of our school and district? What are the skills they need to have, and how can we work together to build those skills? You can have partnerships with restaurants or bakeries, really to get that food and beverage to those events like we were talking about before, and help provide catering opportunities. And they can even help, train students in this business, catering or food preparation. Partnering with the media to provide good publicity for your events or mobilize the community to get to your events. You can partner with artists or different cultural institutions to, again, get mentors for students, but also to provide judges for contests, art contests, science fairs, and then also just to be facilitators for student projects and work with them. They can also be great about providing display space in the community. It's always exciting for a family or a student to have their work displayed out in the community. Partnering with the library for additional space, for support for literacy programs, and for support for specialized content when you're doing events. Partnering with senior citizens groups or senior homes. Again, they can provide child care, they can provide event volunteers, education programs. They can be great partners in history projects and telling oral histories and helping students understand the community in the past and different experiences and the different experiences that make up the community and why it is today, why it is the way it is today. Partnering with banks for not just to get money or training about financials, they also have connections to outside funders that can help the schools. And they are also great with grant writing skills often, bank employees. And then again, like I've mentioned before, partnering with law enforcement or the police, really to provide assistance with crime prevention, mentoring, and developing stronger relationships, helping to develop stronger relationships between law enforcement and youth. So that just gives you some ideas of ways that people, schools, and districts are partnering with community-based organizations, the resources they can bring in. You know, the partnership for you is going to look different based on your needs in your school and district and the needs of your community. But the key here is creating that, shared need and mutually beneficial partnership. So that concludes my examples of ideas for implementation. And then here I just have collected some resources to support your work in this area, and I wanted to point those out to you. The first is a resource on Family School Partnerships 2.0. This is really looking at collaborative strategies to advance student learning, and it's collaborative strategies to work with families, but they also have a very strong section on community partnerships. There's a promising partnership practices through the Colorado Department of Education. These are some great resources here. It's actually a set of like case studies. So what different schools have done collaborating with community-based organizations and what that success looks like. So there's a number of examples out there. This next one on developing and sustaining community collaborations. Again, this is actually, you can see this is a zip folder. It's a whole collection of tools and handouts meant to help you develop these strong partnerships. And that's a great resource. I really recommend that. And then we have this Community Collaboration for School Innovation Toolkit, and that's one document. Again, really takes you through a lot of the stages I discussed today with kind of step-by-step and research-based information to support that work. So we'll come back to this in a minute to see if you guys have questions. But I did want to remind you that they do send evaluation for these webinars, so be on the lookout for that. And then wanted to provide my contact information should you need to contact me at any time with questions, or if you're seeking additional information about this topic or any of the other topics we've covered in this family engagement project. So with that, I am going to conclude my presentation, and we will go back and then see if we have any questions from the group before we go into our sharing. Okay, if not, then I am going to turn it back over to my colleagues at the Wyoming Department of Education and conclude the recording at this time.
Okay. Thank you. I guess just a comment, just listening to this, you know.